Well, it's been a few years since I did this, but today I'm going to dismantle this 2013 Mac Pro. We're going to reapply thermal paste to the GPUs, and we're also going to do a CPU upgrade. So I'm going to set up an overhead camera. We'll bring the camera in a bit closer so you've got all the different angles, and we'll go through the process, and hopefully I can remember how to do it. Now, there are a few things that we need. Obviously, we need our CPU. I'm going with this E5 2667 version 2, which is an 8-core CPU. It's not the original 8-core that Apple supplied with these Mac Pros. It's got an ever so slightly higher boost clock. So that's the one I'm going for, and I'm hoping it's going to give a nice upgrade over the 6-core that's in this machine at the moment. So what do we need to dismantle our machine? Well, naturally, we're going to want some toolkits. So I've got a couple of different precision toolkits here. We're going to want some anti-static protection as well. So I've bought myself a new one, which I'm hoping I'm going to get around my ankle, but because I hate wearing them on my wrist and having my movement limited. This one's quite interesting because it comes with a UK plug. And if you're familiar with our UK 3-prong plug, it has a ground or an earth pin. So this is going to plug into that, attaches here, and then we can just put the strap around our wrist or my ankle, hopefully, and that provides some static protection. Obviously, the components inside this machine are sensitive to static, so if you've built up some static electricity and then you discharge it through the machine, you'll probably fry some of those components, which is not what we want. Now, a couple more things that we're going to need. To remove the old thermal paste, I've got some alcohol wipes, just isopropyl alcohol, and I've got some new thermal paste. And I decided to go with Arctic MX6, which is their more premium compound. And I just got a 2-gram tube of it, which should be enough for what we need. And finally, I've got myself this nice silicone mat, just to help us keep things tidy and a place to put our screws. You don't necessarily need one of those, but you do need to keep yourself well organized whilst you're doing this job. And I'll put links to all of these things. I got them all from Amazon, so I'll put links in the description if you want to try this out for yourself. So let's get everything set up. We'll move the cameras around and we'll get started with the upgrade. Okay, so we're all set up here. We've got everything we need. I've got myself strapped in with my anti-static strap around my ankle. Here are some very appealing shots now of my foot. Yeah, Ben filmed these and told me that I'm going to end up with some kind of foot fan site on the web. Right, first step is that we slide off this cover. And we're going to want to remove all of the RAM modules before we start. Okay, now around the top of the Mac Pro, we've got these screws here. So we're going to start by undoing all of those. Just need to try and find the right bit. Okay, and that's a Torx 10 for those. And where a mat like this helps is that you get all of these little places to put the screws so you can remember in what order you did everything. So those 5 screws allow us to lift off this fan module here. And what you can then see is that it's connected to this board here, and we've got a couple more screws to remove, which look like a smaller bit. That's going to be a Torx 8 for those two. So we can remove this little retaining bracket, and the screws stay with it, and then we can very carefully lift up this connector. We want to be really careful not to damage any of the connectors in this process. So something like a guitar pick or a spudger tool like this can be very useful. And then you'll also notice that there is a little antenna connector as well, which just comes straight off. And there we have our fan unit for the top of the Mac. It's a good time to give that a bit of a clean, which we'll do before we put it back together. This one actually looks really good. Obviously, dust ingress is a problem for a machine like this. It needs the thermal performance, so you don't want it getting full up with dust. Let's just set that across to one side. And we'll remove this little dust bunny. So now we can see the main heatsink here, and we've got the 2 GPU boards then that are attached to the front of the heatsink. and the logic board is in here on the other side of it in the middle. And then we've got the power board here. So we've got a few more things to take apart before we can get this finished. So we're now going to take apart the bottom piece of the Mac Pro, and so it's back to the Torx 10 for that. You should be able to now lift the Mac Pro free of this bottom piece of housing. Again, we'll just want to clean out any dust that's in there. Now here then, on the bottom of the Mac Pro, now we've turned it upside down, is the I/O board. And this is then connected via these three ribbon cables to the two GPUs and the logic board. So we're going to need to carefully remove those. Starting with these two black screws here, which look again to be a Torx 8 for those. So as I go, I'm just putting these screws into little separate containers here on my mat. I believe once we've removed those two screws, we can gently pull this board up. And it is attached into a slot. And what we probably want to do actually before we go too far with that is pull the ribbon connectors off of the GPUs. So again, I'm going to use this spudger tool to just gently lever it off. There we go. So I think the best method with this, if I turn it over, we don't want to lean against the components. So if you just get it come in under the side here, just give it a gentle push, and it comes straight off. There we go. And there's our I/O board. And again, it's a little bit dusty. We'll clean that up as we go. And we're just going to remove this ribbon connector as well from the board here. There we go. So we can put that to one side as well. So the next thing we need to do is to remove the power supply and the I/O panel. And if you look here, we've got this kind of black grate, and either side of it there are some Torx 5 screws. So let's swap to a T5 bit. We'll just remove those carefully. That is quite a small screw, so be careful not to lose that. And that should then allow us to take this grate off. There we go. And you see that's then covering the 4 screws that we need to remove the power board. So those look like they might be T8s, so let's swap back to a T8 bit. I remember the last time I did this, I was absolutely bricking it, but I feel quite calm and happy with doing it this time. But I think that might be something to do with the fact that these things have come down in price so much, so you're not risking quite so much by taking it to pieces. It does look a bit daunting, but it's not as bad as it looks. And there we go. So that's removed the power supply and the I/O panel from the back of the Mac. And so we're left with our nice triangular heatsink, logic board on one side and 2 GPU boards. So let's start with removing the logic board. So you can see here we've got this metal brace which holds the CPU in place, and I believe it also holds this board onto the heatsink. So we'll start by removing these 4 outer screws, and they are again Torx 8. What I'm going to do, so that we don't, because this is all under stress, we're going to do these in a kind of diagonal fashion, and I'm not going to release it all the way. Just take some of the slack up. When we screw it back up and tighten it down, we'll do it in the same way, so sort of going opposite corners a little at a time. So I can see what's happened with this final screw, and I'll show you that in a moment. But first, to finally release the board, we've got a couple more screws to undo up here. Again, I think these are a Torx 8. This is the connector for the power board. And now the logic board comes right off. And the reason why that screw wasn't coming out is because the boss that should be attached here has actually come away. I wonder if that's a sign that this has been potentially upgraded before. If you look at the thermal paste on here, you can see it is all dry. So it's obviously not performing as well as it could have done. But let's now release the CPU bracket here. We'll just move this over to one side. Now notice here we've got these caps which I assume just pull off. There's obviously a screw under there. I wonder if that might be a sticker on the top that we've got to break. Look at that, it is in fact a warranty sticker. Now, my original Mac Pro, the previous one that I had, never had any of these warranty stickers in. So this is something that Apple added, presumably to know if you've done a cheeky processor upgrade yourself, so that then they can refuse service. And I know that no one else had been in that other Mac Pro before me because we bought it new. None of these are under warranty anymore, of course, at least not with Apple, so I don't think you need to worry about taking those off. And I'm going to assume that underneath this goo here, it's T8 again. It is. There we go. So once again, we'll go round in a sort of opposite fashion. These particular CPUs don't have pins on them, they just have pads. So the whole thing has to be put under pressure, and it's all quite delicate. So you just want to take your time with this. Don't rush it. Don't do one screw all the way out so the thing pings off. Okay, so that's the back of the CPU retaining bracket, and we're not going to be able to remove it all the way because of this screw that's remained captive here, but it should now allow us to remove this plate and our CPU. Nice and easy. So we'll just give this a quick clean using one of our alcohol pads. There we go, that's ready to find a new home on eBay. Whilst I've got the pad out, let's just clean up this copper plate as well. It really is quite dried out, this thermal paste. And bear in mind, this Mac Pro was manufactured, would you believe, in 2019. So it's one of the last of these cylinder Macs that was ever made. So if you've got one that comes from sort of 2013, just think what the thermal paste is like now. Okay, so we're going to put the new CPU in straight away, and we'll close this back up again. And then we'll get on with doing the thermal paste on the two GPUs. Now, slight aside, you'll notice I'm using my little Swiss Army knife here. This is called a mini champ, and I have to say it's one of the most useful things I've ever bought. I'm on my second one already. I'm going to put a link to this on Amazon because, honestly, for the tech geek out there, it's the ideal thing to carry around with you. I use it literally every day. Okay, now putting the CPU in, we need to make sure we've lined it up correctly. If you try to put it in the wrong way, the locating pins just won't line up. So we just gently pop that in. Then we can put our bracket back over the top. We need to just kind of hold that in position whilst we turn the board over. And then we can start putting the screws back in. So we'll start on this side. Just screw it in part of the way because that will help hold the thing together. And then you'll find that there's quite a bit of force that's got to be applied to this bracket to get the screw to the point where it will start biting. It does take a little bit of force, that. Okay, so that all looks good, so we'll tighten it up now. Don't over tighten those screws, just you'll know when it's about the right pressure. So there we go, that's our CPU board ready to go back in. But before we do that, let's take the GPUs off and we'll reapply the thermal paste there. So first things first, we want to take our SSD off of this GPU. And for that, we're going to need to change our bit because it's a small Phillips head. So you can see that I'm using an NVMe drive with a little adapter here, which is quite a neat solution. And I've got a nice big heatsink on my NVMe drive as well. Now what you'll notice here then for the GPUs is you've got a similar sort of idea with this metal cross brace. So we'll just start undoing that now. And this looks like it's a Torx 8. Okay, then we've got two more screws to undo here, and these are the Torx security type, where they have a little pin in the middle. Those are the type I've been using, so Should work fine. It's still size 8. So you just prise the board off because it's held on there with that thermal paste. And again, it looks quite dry and probably about time that we replace it. So let's clean it up with another alcohol pad. We're going to do one at a time with these so that we don't get confused between which board we're working on. That's that part cleaned up. Now for the GPU itself. And there we go. Looks kind of nice and clean now. Thermal paste is horrible stuff. It goes everywhere. I haven't been able to clean it all off from around the edges here, but it is non-conductive, so it shouldn't actually be a problem. And then what we're going to do is put a small amount in the middle. Once it gets squished onto this, it will flatten out and spread across the surface of the chip. Now please excuse any background noise you can hear. We've got a pool table just next door which is being actively used at the moment. Some of our staff have got a league going. So I think that should be enough. Haven't done the neatest job there, but I'm sure it'll be fine when we reapply it. So next step is to put the board back on and reapply the bracket. So we just want to carefully locate it. We'll just hold that in place whilst we put these screws in. Yeah, now I'm looking at it, I don't think we needed to remove those 2 screws at all. I think it was just that the board was stuck using the thermal paste. So let's reapply the bracket. And there we go, that's one of the GPU boards done. Now, what if you second guess yourself and think, did I add enough thermal paste? Well, if you're not sure, you could, once you've tightened it all up like that, is undo it all and go and have a look and see if it's spread across the entire surface of the chip. I'm sure it will have done. If you have a look on Arctic's website, they do have an application guide, and you can see, because they use a piece of glass over the chip, that you don't actually need as much thermal paste as you might think. So, one down, one to go. Same procedure again on the other board. And the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that things have moved around. That's just because we paused to take a thumbnail whilst it was all in bits. So, next step is to just apply some thermal paste onto this GPU and get it reattached to the main thermal block there. I probably do want to just slide the pad back into shot for the overhead camera. Okay, so now we're ready for the last job, which is to put some thermal paste on the CPU and reattach this to the main thermal heatsink. It seems like it's all snugged back up nice and tight. So let's carry on with the reinstall, and hopefully all is well when we test the machine. So we've got these screws here to reattach the power lines onto the logic board. Now we can bring the power supply back in. And it's probably going to be easier if I were to temporarily lay that on its side. We've got these tiny little T6 screws to reattach this grate here. So now we can reattach the I/O board, and we need to start by reinstalling this ribbon connector. So we just carefully line it up with the pins and press it on. And now we're going to line up the slot here with the connector. Make sure it's firmly seated on. There we go. You heard some audible clicks there as we got it seated into position. And we got these 2 Torx 8 screws to hold it in place. And then we need to reconnect the GPUs with these ribbon connectors. Again, locate them onto the pins and just carefully snap it into place. Okay, then we can reattach the bottom of the Mac Pro. Fortunately, there is only one way it can go on. And finally, we've got the top fan to go back on. So you'll recall that we've got this little ribbon connector to attach. So we'll do that first of all. And we've got this little bracket to screw on to keep it in place. So first of all, just line it up and gently press it on. So finally, after the fan, we've got the little antenna connector for the Wi-Fi. A little bit fiddly. Home straight. Just 5 more screws to get this top back on. So finally, we just need to reinstall the SSD. And though I just said finally, it wasn't finally because we still got to put the RAM in, but that's a nice easy job. So we just need to make sure that we seat our RAM in correctly. It needs to be pushed in all the way. So there you have it. We've reapplied thermal paste to the GPUs and we've installed a new CPU with fresh thermal paste as well. Next thing we need to do, the moment of truth, is to fire this up and give it some testing and hope we don't have to take it apart again. Okay, so we've got the Mac set up with this little portable screen here just for testing purposes. So here goes nothing, the moment of truth. Let's press the power button and hopefully we'll hear the chime. Yes, never in doubt. I think that's generally a good sign. If you get the chime when you press the power button and everything switches on. And yeah, the fan is turning as well. And I've got the boot up screen here. A bit difficult to set this up in a way that the camera can actually see what's going on. So I'm just going to screen record once we get into Mac OS. And we'll just do a few tests to see how things have improved with the new CPU in. Okay, so first things first, let's just run a couple of checks. And the first thing that I want to do is just go up to TG Pro and I want to flick the fan into manual mode and fire it all the way up to top speed. And yeah, that's all working fine. I'll put that back in my auto mode. Good, next thing to do is to go to the About This Mac screen. And yes, we can see we now have a 3.3 gigahertz 8-core Intel Xeon E5. Excellent. Let's run some benchmarks. So we'll start with Geekbench 5. Well, that's a pretty good result. So we're up to 895 on single core, which I have to say for a Geekbench 5 result for a Mac Pro, that's about the highest single core I've seen. And then we've got 6,493 on multi-core. And that's a really great result as well. I know the 12 core and the 10 core can achieve higher multi-core scores, but the great thing about this 8-core CPU is that you can access more of that performance more of the time. So for most people, unless you need that additional multi-threaded performance, you'll find the 8-core is the sweet spot. That's a really good result. Let's try Geekbench 6 now. And there's the result for Geekbench 6. So we get 827 for single core and 4,824 for multi-core. Of course, Geekbench 6 is a newer test, which includes things like machine learning that these older CPUs just aren't well suited for. But nonetheless, this isn't a bad result. Even in 2024, this is a usable machine. And I'm really pleased with that upgrade. If you compare that to the results that we got off of the 6-core, again, we've got a decent upgrade by moving to the 8-core. And that CPU cost me £17 from eBay, plus a bit of my time and a few accessories, obviously, to get it installed. So the upgrade's gone well. I'm pretty pleased with the outcome. I will do some more detailed thermal testing and stress the graphics cards a bit just to check that the system's all fine and running well. But I'm pretty happy with that so far, and we can perhaps move on to our next experiment. So all in all, I think that's a really good result, and I hope you enjoyed watching that process, and I hope it might be helpful to you if you're planning to upgrade your Mac Pro. The question is, what next? I think I'm going to try playing around with some docks to see whether or not we can connect Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3 and perhaps expand our connectivity horizons with the Mac Pro. I think that might be interesting. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to see that content, and don't forget to ring the bell. Thanks as always for your support, especially if you use our affiliate links in the description. Remember, it doesn't cost you anything extra if you're buying something on Amazon anyway. Just click that link first and our channel earns a small commission. Thank you for that. Thanks, of course, for your thumbs up or even your thumbs down if you didn't enjoy the content. I look forward to reading your comments, and I'll see you again soon for some more geekery.